And with that, welcome to the KCP community meeting, the last one of January, because we are already, I don't know, when did the year had its first month over already? I do not know. But anyway, before we get started, usual housekeeping, usual reminder, this meeting is governed by the CNCF Code of Conduct, which boils down to let's be excellent to each other. So please keep that in mind. And with that, first agenda item that we always have is there someone who would like to introduce themselves, maybe reintroduce themselves because they haven't been here for a long time, or basically just say hello? Hannes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I guess I would introduce myself. I was here last time, but I didn't say anything, mostly because I'm shy. I work for Accenture. I'm currently on a project at E.ON, and we are using KCP as kind of a platform component. And with that, I'm also looking at what kind of features or user side aspects we want to address, and that is something which I've also brought for today. So that from my side. Everything else, I guess we'll get to know each other over time.
All right, thank you so much, Hannes, and welcome. Okay, anyone else?
Just one question. I know a lot of other things are doing it, writing down the attendees. Should we do this?
I think we might want to start with that. Yes, why not? Let me maybe take this as an item to update the template for each meeting. And then we can start, I think, with the next meeting to basically write down attendees, or like people can add themselves as attendees. Okay. Then why don't I write this down already? Let me bring up the screen and we can take a note on that already. So meeting template. So, all right, that's great. And with that, why don't we get started with the topics on the agenda? Because I think we have quite a few and some of them might require some longer discussion. So let's get started. So the first one on the agenda, I think there's a GitHub issue for this, but basically, Stefan, Sebastian, I see this is your topic about API promotions.
Yeah, I can start it then. Stefan, you jump in. So Stefan and I were chatting. I mean, some of the APIs are already quite long and long there, and there are not so many changes there. And we were thinking like, okay, first of all, is it time to start promoting some of this? But potentially even like, okay, to do this, then we should start thinking about what's the process to promoting, because currently everything is in alpha, and I guess we should define a process so that we have clarity how this works, but then also look into what could be good candidates to promote to a beta status, for example, workspaces and other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think this would be a good opportunity to think about the process. Like maybe we should come up with, at least some documentation on this, how we would promote APIs and what kind of like expectations we would have for alpha, beta, and stable APIs. That seems like a sensible idea to me. Any thought on the matter? Is that an agreement from everyone that this is a good idea, that we should start thinking about this?
Yeah, I think I try to put some of the my random thoughts in the issue, where basically what could be missing to start promoting, like alphas to betas. But I'm wondering, is there any other APIs, or are we just looking across the board for all APIs, basically?
Just an idea, a good exercise might be to take all of our APIs and order them by maturity.
Yeah, that's a good call.
I'm curious about the results.
It's like we know out of the box where we need work to be done, like API exports, permission claims, we have planned things there. A bit of maybe on the workspaces itself. So maybe just a public discussion and there's some Google Doc where people could outline what we think is missing. Because some of them, like, they're quite, I think, decent and could just go straight through, but. And do we need to borrow some Kubernetes promotion patterns? I mean, like, what we commit to once it goes beta and what we commit when it goes stable, as Marvin mentioned, some framework document.
I mean, there's basically, I guess, two work streams, right? There is, okay, which of our APIs should we be promoting? And then the general, like, what would the policies look like for this? I personally would like for, I'm not sure if this should only apply to stable APIs or also to beta APIs, but I would personally like to have a CI job that will basically not pass your PR if you're trying to change stable APIs. Like, if we, at least if we make these kind of guarantees about APIs, if you say stable APIs, well, they are stable. And if we need to change something about them, well, we need to start a new API. But I think if we come up with some guarantees, like, we should encode them so that we, follow them automatically. There might be like exceptional cases where we need to change those APIs. I'm not going to dispute that. I hope it's never going to happen. But I for 99.9% of all pull requests, there's going something wrong if we change like APIs we make certain guarantees for.
Yeah, I wouldn't try to invest too much in machinery. Even upstream doesn't have that, right? Kubernetes. It would be nice if we had a API approval label, maybe, which must be explicitly set, something like that. So you don't accidentally accept a PR, approve a PR without that. I'm not talking about restricting the amount of people. We don't have so many you can approve anyway, but at least to make it explicit. Upstream has this API change label, I think, and then there's an extra approval by somebody from the API reviewer group necessary.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's too complex to have machinery for this, and maybe the job doesn't need to be blocking. This kind of label. I think MJ, what Stefan is saying is that there should be a separate label that you need to apply to a PR that is of that kind.
The API change is automatic in Kube, but then you have to, I think it's by approver group, but we could have just a second level API change approved or something, which you have to put in addition. And then you remember that it's necessary, it's special, take a second look, a third look, something like that.
Yeah. Makes sense. Because for me, immediately this guy popped out. Like, you might remember this from the last year. Stefan, where you tried to change some of the fields in API, and we got a bit pushback already that it would be breaking change.
There was even a Golang change, right?
Yeah.
I think the API at the end of the day was not different.
Yeah, but I think this is why we should like document like what our guarantees are. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, as long as everything is alpha, like if everything is alpha, nothing is alpha. Like people still expect us to, not just break their KCP setups, understandable. But once we start promoting things, like, these guarantees need to be a bit clear what people can expect from KCP upgrades. So how do we proceed on this? I think is the question. Does someone want to sit down? I mean, we have maybe it makes sense to, well, we know that we have API changes, pretty like maybe big ones that we want to add.
So which action items do we have?
That's the question.
We have to document the APIs we have and what must be done, something like that, right? So some document maybe, or could be a GitHub issue as well, doesn't matter. Then we need something like a guarantee document markdown. Maybe we can borrow that from Cube.
Yeah, I just was looking this up. This one is the one where the guarantees Cube is giving.
And the third one is basic machinery.
I mean the CI machinery.
Yeah, I think
Is
that
the first point includes the like order APIs and maturity stuff?
Yes, yeah, that's just an exercise towards that.
basically it's taking stock essentially. Like where are we at the moment, right? Okay, I would say maybe as a follow-up, we create issues to track these action items. If there's someone who would like to work on them, I would say they can assign these GitHub issues to themselves. I mean, if someone here is already like has an idea and wants to work on them, like be our guest. But yeah, I think it makes sense for to keep these action items offline, and then we can basically see where we put them on the roadmap. But it feels like the general consensus is, yes, we need this. We probably need this sooner than later. So we should start working on it.
Yeah, I think especially if we targeting also to pushing KCP to what's the next level?
Incubating.
Yeah, incubating. I think it's a good sign that some of the stuff starts already promoting to beta and not like, oh yeah, still everything is alpha.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. That's part of project maturity, to have these kind of policies and to follow through with them. Okay. Any more, like I just want to like see if we can move ahead because there's still lots more things, but any other notes on API promotions for now? Okay, doesn't seem to be the case. Then briefly, I opened a thread on the Slack channel. I would like to start thinking about the 0.27 release. We have a couple of PRs that were already posted in said Slack thread to that basically where we want to get this in before we cut the release. I want to create a milestone, so this is an action item for me. Create GitHub milestone to track these. But with that being said, maybe we should briefly talk about the Kubernetes version that this release is gonna have, because I think we had some discussion in that thread ongoing. So we're currently on Kubernetes 1.31.0, I believe. And I know that we have the 1.32 rebase ongoing from Robert. The question now is, do we want to include that in the 0.27 release? Or if we don't, do we do a patch release rebase at least to pull in the latest fixes that we could profit from Kubernetes upstream? And yeah, Stefan.
Yeah, I don't think it's a good idea to block a release on a rebase. Rebase lands when it lands, and then we should have enough time. So there shouldn't be a rush to get that in. It needs baking time. Even when it's merged, it needs baking time to validate.
Yeah. Agreed. And you said something in the thread, I believe, about how it should probably be at the beginning of a development cycle and not at the end.
That's a bad practice. I mean, it's the same thing as don't wait for the rebase for the release, right?
What do you mean?
Yeah, release now or nowish, like in the next week, the 0.27, and then merge the rebase after when it's ready. And then wait until we are happy enough to release another release. This could be much later.
Okay, so I thought you were saying that was also bad practice, but that's not what we're saying, right?
I'm not sure. I mean, release first, then merge the rebase.
Yeah,
That
okay, yeah.
should be the rule.
All right.
And yes, the minor release is helpful. Let's do that. This should be quick.
Merge minor rebase at the beginning of a development cycle, not at the end. All right.
Minor and patch is always confusing, but yes, it's right what you want.
I think I will do.
Yeah, it's correct.
Okay.
I meant minor as 131, like the patch.
Yeah. Basically,
Oh,
stay on the minor.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. I mean, that makes sense. I think we should coordinate then. Like we have the thread ongoing already. I will create the milestone. I will keep track of everything to see like what we think we need for the release, what is a blocker. And yeah, then that makes sense to me. Are there any other thoughts on this? Because for release, like our release process, we have documented. How we do release planning is a little bit more flexible because we cut releases when we have enough. Maybe eventually it also makes sense to think about release cycles, but I think that might be a topic for later, of like stabilizing release cycles. Okay. Then that seems like we don't have any other topic or like no other topic regarding other comments to the release. Then speaking of rebase, Robert, I believe you're on the call. Yes, you have questions regarding that. And I see that you unmuted yourself, but we can't hear you, I believe.
Still no.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, the headphones have betrayed me. All right, so this question is about our garbage collector and the changes that the new garbage or the changes in 132 upstream introduce. And mainly they revolve around removing the logs that we used to have for the workers in the garbage controller, garbage collector controller. They are now gone, and what I would like to achieve from my comment here is maybe not to have immediate response from you, but to at least raise the awareness about this topic and maybe have other people look into this also, just to see if we are or are not introducing more issues to our code base. So removing the logs solved two pretty serious bugs upstream that probably we are also affected by. So I think it's more of a question, not a question of if we should include this bug fix by removing the logs, but rather what would be the consequences and if it would be possible to somehow work around those. The main consequence that I'm not entirely sure about is that maybe we would miss some events to trigger garbage collection.
Stefan, I think you can go ahead.
If we keep the logs as carry patch, at least for the repairs to land it, this is a lot of code. Could we do that and then tackle getting rid of that afterwards?
It's not a lot of code at all.
So it still works, but we have bugs which are fixed upstream.
Yeah, we can
Potentially.
phrase it like that. Yeah.
So I mean, if this blocks the rebase at the moment, keep it as carry patch, make the issue, and we should tackle that just after.
Yeah, I don't think so. I haven't gotten to the point where I can actually test it out because I'm stuck at another issue at the moment. And that's about protobuf support in client Go. So I wasn't able to see if it causes any significant issues for us. But in any case, it's not a lot of code that we would have to keep around. Maybe we could also just, if we have such extensive testing, I'm not sure we do, we could try a patch with and without and see how it goes.
I think I'm stuck on this. Let's limit our risk for now.
Yeah. Okay.
Carry patch in, the code is small, create an issue, and one of us picks the issue, and once we have a established branch, we basically did it from there. And it's like, let's not spin a cycle in this too much.
Okay, cool. And then the next question is just below the next comment on the same issue. And sorry, this one is about our code generator used to, or still does in the recent release, add this not ignore auto-generated build constraint, which then causes client generator from the upstream's code generator to not be able to pick up the files in the packages because the tag is triggered in such a way that the files are ignored, and then we don't generate code. The workaround for that was simply to remove that ignore auto-generated constraint, and then it automatically worked. So then I was wondering why it was working before for 131 release, the rebase that we had, and also why is that constraint there in our code generator in the first place? For the first question, I'm not sure. I haven't been able to find the root cause, but both MJ and I tried to build and try to generate the clients using our current fresh clones from our repos, and we both hit the same issue. So that was very interesting and strange. But then, yeah, sorry.
No, so we did some changes in Client Go, and I think you said like some transit dependencies might got updated.
Yeah.
Like I think the question is anybody against if we drop this auto-generator from our SDK? Like we didn't manage to find out the reason why it was there in the first place.
But I found this tag being used in our code generator repo already in the very first pull request. Nobody made any comment on why is it there or should it be there. And from then on, it just carried over up until now. And just during this rebase, we hit the issue.
I think this was around how those generators pass the Go code. Like the old parser was falling over or something. This was in Cube for many years.
Yeah, but
so it doesn't. I mean, for a user of the client libraries, no, they don't care, right? It's just our domain. So if we don't need it, drop it. Sure.
Yeah, but if you check also upstream's client generated code, they don't have it either. So
yeah, it was changed. I think there was a major shift a few releases ago because Go has, Go changed in some way. So I think when modules were introduced or the Go work stuff, there was a point when things changed.
Okay.
So if you look 5 years back, you probably find it.
Okay. Cool. So yeah, as MJ said, I guess we have a vote if we can remove it or not.
Just drop it, I think, and that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed. We're not talking about something like very unexplored, like it's a global tag. And we don't seem to see any usage for it on our side or like any reason for it. And yeah, like if upstream dropped it, this might be like worth looking at briefly. Like if you can find it in like, well, okay, 5 years ago. But yeah, I would also say this is fine to drop if everything works afterwards. Like, I think we're good.
Cool. Okay, thank you. And then currently as I mentioned before, I'm stuck at protobuf client Go. Maybe we can just take it offline, and I will post my questions into the channel. But I was just wondering if anyone on the call has experience with both protobufs and client Go, and using protobuf codec for calls, because at the moment I'm stuck on end-to-end tests.
Mirza, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just want to question it to Robert. Is the protobuf really needed, or was this just an additional improvement for performance?
So this was added on 132 without feature gates, without anything. So there is some logic to. So what I mean to say is that we cannot simply opt out
Okay.
of it. At least it seems to be the case.
Okay.
And yeah,
No, so I
Mhm.
think if you could push a branch somewhere where like anybody like me, Marvin, Stefan, whatever, can check it out and try to run it to get the same stuff, I think we can try to look into that as offline.
sure.
Like
Okay.
for the like challenge there, as we talked offline, is that at some point somewhere, client sends Protos request, but server expects JSON, and the marshaller just blows away. So somewhere, basically, it's a mismatch, and we just need to dig it out, basically.
Yeah, that's exactly the case. I looked at the buffer data, well, the data inside the buffers. It was a binary data, and then I got an error code from JSON marshaller. So
Okay, I think this might be getting too specific. Let's take this offline into a thread.
Yeah.
Because I think like we won't figure this out without looking at
yeah,
it.
sure. Sorry. Okay, and I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you very much. Okay. We have at least 2 more topics on the agenda. So let me bring this quickly up. And so one of the topics, and I'll just like briefly preface this. Hannes has worked on a prototype for this, but basically we've had these conversations for a while about how workspace types are supposed to work. At the moment, they work more like templates. So your workspaces will be created or will be initialized more specifically in a certain way. But afterwards, changes to the workspace type do not reflect on workspaces being created from that workspace. And I think we've had several conversations over the last year probably, where like various people were like, actually I would like this to be like more active in life cycling my workspaces, because if I add an API binding, I might have to like manually add that across like 100 workspaces or so, and that's not sustainable. So with that introduction, Hannes, do you want to talk a little bit about this topic and what you've worked on so far?
Yeah, sure. So adding a life cycle to the workspace type comes with a couple of considerations and challenges. I've started off with just a general idea. So for me, if I'm creating a workspace, I or somebody who creates resources and stuff inside is responsible for what's happening on this workspace. And with that, for me, it makes sense to have a lifecycle declaration on the workspace. So on the workspace, when I'm creating it, I can say, I want to add a lifecycle or some maintenance mode. And I declare specifically that I want to reconcile what the workspace type that I've selected is doing. From there, it goes on to, okay, I have my workspace type and I'm reconciling the default API bindings that I have on there. With that come both the resource schemas, but also the permission claims. And here, at least in my eyes, I'm considering, okay, I've agreed to have this maintenance mode, so I'm also agreeing to admit all the permission claims that belong to it. So because I've said I want to maintain the status, and that means I'm in an environment where the owner of the workspace type is also somewhat reliable. And then the last part for me is in terms of ownership of the API bindings. At the moment, I don't have a really good mode to maintain them when I'm removing default API bindings. So say I'm changing the default API bindings on one of the workspace types involved in the workspace type tree. I would then have to remove it from all the workspaces. But for each workspace, I would have to check first, is there some sort of resource associated with it? And in case it should be orphaned. So at the moment, I've set it up so when I create everything, I'm reconciling the existence, but I'm not reconciling or removing API bindings, because if I did, I would have to verify that there's nothing getting lost or nothing getting stuck or whatever it is. At the same time, we don't have any validation that the users on the workspace don't delete API bindings. If we had that, it would be maybe a different discussion, because but at the moment, I'm just assuming if somebody deletes an API binding, I'm also reconciling that it is created again. So a lot of points that are not structured at all. I'm sorry. But I would be interested in hearing your thoughts on this, or if there's something that I should be addressing additionally. And the commit or contribution is also not complete, because I keep getting hung up on the indexes. So if somebody can help me out with us, that would be great.
Yeah, I think this is like overall very interesting, because like especially around the orphaning API bindings, and who basically, like, who effectively owns the API bindings created from a default API binding. Because I, for example, would say, and this is like, I think, up to discussion, but if you if you delegate the life cycle of your workspace to the workspace type, which you're doing to some degree here, if you say, okay, maintain my workspace for me, please. I would actually say that deleting an API binding that comes from the workspace type should maybe not even be possible. And like we can maybe attach some special labels that would block deletion and that cannot be removed. Or like I remember us discussing this, I think in Paris, right, MJ? That we were also thinking about a layer below a workspace, where basically API bindings would be created that the user doesn't even have access to. But then, visibility is a problem. So maybe just preventing an API binding from being deleted is actually the way to go.
But do we have some sort of validating webhook, like a policy engine that is already included, or would it be something that we would have to build here?
We have the admission chain of KCP itself, into which we could, I think, build something like that as an additional admission plugin. If I'm not mistaken, MJ, what do you think?
Yeah, that was, I think, the idea that we allow deletion only by the actor who created it. So there was a something conversation that workspace type initiated workspace gets specific annotation who owns it, like from the service provider side, some kind of identity, and we allow only that identity to delete bindings. It's like there is so many other questions still, like what to do with, do we allow some other bindings to come from outside? Like, does the workspace user is allowed to bind something else from somewhere outside? How do we treat those bindings too? Or we say like, no, if it's marked by this, you only get your workspace bindings only from the workspace type. or we slice and dice it. But
I think that feels too draconian. Like, basically, it's one thing to, well, there are API
Yeah.
bindings we maintain, but taking away the ability to create new ones, like in such an environment, I would simply say, do not assign anyone permissions to bind.
yeah, okay,
So-
that makes sense.
It's
So
a
we're
bit-
saying, okay, let's limit it to basically workspace type owner, like can only bind and delete bindings, and some kind of admission prevents it to do that, plus admission to prevent changing the bind owner on that workspace too.
Yeah, I think the technical details, like, we should maybe also take offline.
But yeah,
From a design perspective, I think this, like, the overall ideas are in here, right? Something that I was thinking of we should maybe talk about is what was it again? Let me hold my thoughts there. Yeah. Who decides if what the life cycle mode is? In your proposal, Hannes, you're saying that the person that creates the workspace can make that choice, right?
Yeah, I've also added it in the Workspace plugin and the Workspace API. So if you check that file's changed, there's a flag, and also in the API it should be a new field at the moment.
Yeah, and I think this is something that we should talk about, just to see if this is the direction we want to go collectively. Because I'm wondering, is there a case to be made that it should be the workspace type that defines what kind of life cycling it does? And when you use a workspace type, you're accepting what that workspace type does exactly. Like, any thoughts on what would be the better way to handle this situation?
I'm thinking out loud, devil's advocate. Do we see a case where somebody creates a workspace type and wants to opt out of the management? Like, people might want to opt out, but that basically it gives a hard day for the provider. So,
Yeah, we had this discussion before, and my view on it was that if I want to govern what happens on KCP, I would employ some sort of policy engine and would just say, okay, you can create a workspace with a different lifecycle configuration.
I think that makes sense. I think that would basically allow you to have this more, enforced kind of style while maintaining the flexibility for users. I think the interesting question is, as MJ has said, do we have a case where a workspace type owner has to do something or wants to do something, and that would depend on the lifecycle mode? Because the case I could think of is the cleaning up of API bindings, but honestly, I would maybe say that we don't clean up API bindings.
Has there already been some sort of consideration around API export lifecycle things? Because if I have an API export, obviously I know if there are claims or resources created against it. But what happens if you want to switch to a new version, or if you want to sunset or deprecate your version? Does somebody create an API export have options here?
You can bring in new API resource schemas that basically maybe even add a new version of your API. And there's the API conversion object that allows you to define how between like resource versions something would be converted. But I think overall, I think the life cycling of APIs is something that there could be improvements there. I don't think we have enough there yet. But yeah, on the cleanup side, I would strongly lean towards we are not deleting API bindings. Because that seems very disruptive.
Find it for tomorrow.
Come again?
Find it for tomorrow.
Yeah.
I think the huge improvement would be already like life cycling, adding stuff, things like that. So that's already win. Just a question is either workspace, like initiation of workspace, or as you mentioned, workspace type.
How do you mean?
I mean, as I understood currently, PR is workspace creator user opts in to management.
Yep.
And you, Marvin, you said, what if workspace type defines that everybody who uses this workspace type automatically opts in?
Yeah, but Hannes made this good point that you can enforce this through a policy engine if you really need it.
Well, if you are a platform operator, if it's something where but I don't know about this use case, Marvin, that you mentioned. If the platform operator is not the workspace owner, but it's workspace owner is somebody else, and they want to make sure that the workspace type is always used in maintenance mode, or if they need something to reconcile. A good example would be if you have something like dependent resources, or if, I don't know, if you have multiple API exports that need each other, but that would happen in the backend, wouldn't it?
I mean, in general, I think this is mostly like going towards permission claims, right? That, something basically shows up in the virtual workspace for an API export. I do think, however, that as a developer for a service that goes through that way to like reconcile resources, the controller needs to you need to do defensive programming basically. Because yeah, sure, maybe your workspace type is enforcing it, but there's a good chance that there are API bindings out there to your API that are not automatically managed. So for example, if you add a new permission claim, then you need to assume when you work on this that that object will not be available from everyone yet. And yes, that can mean that your service is not fully functional at that point in time. But I think that's not an assumption that you can have in a KCP environment. So I'm not sure we should strengthen it through this level of enforcement.
So I will ask it differently. Like I will use like which paths to us gives more flexibility. Because if we open doors now and say users can opt in, opt out, we already can potentially see the cases where, okay, what happens if somebody opt in and somebody opt out, and you as a programmer is defensive programming? Like it creates these edge cases. So if we go say like, okay, workspace type now is the owner, and if you choose this workspace type, you like opt in automatically. This allows us to add this relaxation later on, where if we relax it now, it's like bird out of the hand. Like we can't pull it back. It's just impossible. Because
yes, but like I think we have this problem anyway with API bindings that are not managed by a workspace type, or even I'm not sure like if this is like a real use case, but I could imagine let's say you change something about the API export, and your controller is obviously like still running. Maybe you even deployed a new version of it that takes into consideration that there was a change to your permission claims or so. But for that to propagate across shards, it might take, let's say, maybe a few seconds. Maybe I don't know, like what we're talking about. And if your code can't handle that, and I don't know, goes off the rail of the tracks, I don't know. I think we won't get around this problem because the system is eventually consistent. It's not that you snap your fingers and everything is like you want it to be.
Okay, I'm conscious we went a bit to discussion stuff. Should it something like we pick up in a thread and discuss it like option A and option B and just decide it asynchronous?
No, I think that makes sense. I think that Hannes' current solution is good in flexibility. I'm a fan of doing it this way. But yeah, we should put it on a thread, take it offline, have one more round of discussion. But so far, like it doesn't seem like there are any like red flags being raised right now about something here. There are a few details.
I like where it's going.
Yeah, it's not working yet. That might be a red flag. But that's probably just my code.
Fair enough. But from a conceptual level, I think we are on a pretty good track here. Okay. There's still much more to say here, but we have the problem that we only have 5 minutes. This will not give us a proper intro to this topic either. But MJ, do you want to?
No. I think let's move it to the next one. I added here, so we just started discussing this today synchronously. There is so much to flesh out. So I'm just, if people have interest and time, we can start reading through it and leave comments, because I think we need to gather requirements of this first. But long story short is we looking how to promote, show some resources from the provider side. An example we spinning is you do a virtual machine service. You provide your users a virtual machine as a service. So your users create CRDs, virtual machine. They need to specify types of those machines. So like in Azure or AWS, and you list types in a console, you pick and choose like standard D4, D8, or whatever, and you get it. How to provide something similar in the KCP. How to give a list, which is managed by provider, into workspace, so user could either just look to the list or use it as a reference to other objects, basically. Like, while API bindings and exports goes one way, this would be the street another way. And I'm conscious there's like 101 edge case and requirement here, so.
It's another fairly complex feature, but yeah, let's push it to the next meeting. But just a little teaser to everyone that maybe this is something that others are like, yeah, we need that too. So let's have a conversation then. Okay, with 4 minutes left on the clock, I do want to open the floor if there are any other topics that you did not bring. Or as I today learned, if you want to edit the community meeting minutes, you need to be on the KCP Dev email list, the Google group. I was not aware of that. So if you have a topic but you weren't able to edit, that would also be the time to bring it up. Okay, seems like everyone is happy. Then I'm giving you back 3 whole minutes of your life. Thank you very much, folks, and have a great evening and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.